welcome to another Sci-Fi Fantasy Saturday. Now, I've been leaning a little bit too much towards the fantasy lately, so I decided we better bring it back a little bit to the sci-fi. So today, I'm going to take a quick look at Forbidden Stars. This is a game that was published by Fantasy Flight Games back when they had a license or a relationship with Games Workshop, which are the creators of the Warhammer and Warhammer 40K series. Now, Warhammer 40K, if you don't know what that is, I can't help you. No, Warhammer and Warhammer 40K, Warhammer's the fantasy version, Warhammer 40K is the space and sci-fi version, is a universe that's created by Games Workshop that really is based on miniatures, based on, painting miniatures and, playing on a kind of a skirmish format on a tabletop with terrain and the like. And so, a lot of fans out there, been around for a long time. I never really got into Warhammer 40K, or Warhammer for that matter, on the miniatures side. I played a little bit of Warhammer 40K. I played with some friends' miniatures, but really never got into it. Never really got into any of the miniatures or the different miniature sets. However, I was very intrigued with the Warhammer 40K world that has been built up and created over time. And so did get into some of the adjacent Warhammer 40K adjacent and Warhammer adjacent type systems. A lot of those games were board games that, Games Workshop came out with. But then, of course, when Fantasy Flight and Games Workshop partnered together, there was a whole series of games that came out, card games and other board games, and this game here, Forbidden Stars. And so have gotten into a little bit of the Warhammer 40K outside of the miniatures and really intrigued by that whole universe. Forbidden Stars is not a original design in as much as it is a reboot of, let's get this over here, Coffin Box, StarCraft, the board game. Now, StarCraft, the board game is based on an IP by Blizzard Entertainment, StarCraft, the computer game. And this is by Corey Knizia with Christian Peterson, who was the founder of Fantasy Flight Games. But it was a good game, and actually, to me, it was a precursor to like Star Trek Ascendancy, the way it had like the planets, and you had the space tracks or the trade routes and stuff, that how you got to some of the planets and stuff like that. But this had an interesting system, but it was a little clunky, a little detailed. And one of the things they did when they came up with Forbidden Stars is they took a lot of the concepts from StarCraft, the board game, and they streamlined them and put them into this box. And this was a big box because they expected to, I assume they expected to come out with a lot of expansions. However, it was not to be because Fantasy Flight and Games Workshop parted ways, and we never got all those expansions. But you did get 4 factions that came in the box. You got the Space Marines, or the Ultramarines. You got the Chaos Space Marines, or the Chaos faction. You had the Orcs, because you got to have orcs in space, and then you had the Eldar. So anybody who's familiar with Warhammer 40K, these are very common factions, and a lot of armies, people build up a lot of armies on these. Now, as you can see here, these are like the player boards for each of the factions. You can see that this is the build cost here. And then for each of these different units, this is like a city and a factory. But then you have units that can fight or take damage, and then there's like a combat value, a health value, and a morale value for each one of these. Your troops and ground troops and spaceships and the like. And each one has different units that comes along with a unique mini that comes along with it as well. So, this is a Fantasy Flight game, so there's going to be plastic. Plastic will be had. So there's some of the ships. This is the Chaos faction. There's an example of some of their ships. Here's like a scout for them. And this is their troops. They did kind of an interesting thing in this. They kind of had like a banner or, the flag that goes along with some of the units. They didn't have like the military or the troop unit. It was more like their symbol for the unit. But some of the units did have, had little minis that go along with it as well. This is the Ultramarine, just to give you some example. Some nice ships. Some nice, very functional and decent minis there. This was a nice chunky little tank there. And of course, these were all the units that go on the board. There's a scout ship, as you can see, just represented by a flag or a banner here. But that was your Ultramarines. That's the actual to mark where the troops were on the board. So what is the board? Well, as I said, here in StarCraft, you had kind of a planet, and then you would have like a trade attack route or a star route that would go to it. But these in this game have little geomorphic boards here. Actually, not so much geomorphic. They're all square, and they would show you the sectors on the board. And they were two-sided, so you have quite a bit of replayability. And there were several of these that came in the set, and you would lay them out, like this. One of the things that kind of turned some people off was, they're all like in a picture frame, right? So what the heck is that about? But that really didn't distract too much, because you had like these with void or space storms. I think they're called the void or something. But those would be on the board and kind of live on those edges, and they would move around, and that inhibited movement. So that would kind of block off certain paths, so you had to make kind of different decisions of how you moved around the board, because some of those voids or space storms or whatever would block off movement. I can't remember what they were called now. And each of the planet had some different characteristics or abilities. Like the green is usually the materials, because you had to mine materials in order to build things. So because everything had a build cost in this green. And everybody had a track. Each of the factions had their own track where you can keep track of, the build cost, and a nice little dial that you assembled. But the key to winning this game, this isn't your typical, empire builder where you build a lot of units over time and take over planets and then build up a huge empire, and that's how you win the game. The way you won the game is you had these objectives. Like these were the objectives for the Ultramarines, and these would be put out on certain planets on the grid, which would be relatively good sized grid here. And you had to conquer that planet. You had to, capture that planet or take control of that planet in order to get that objective. And so each side had a number of objectives based on the number of players that were playing in the game. And this game played 2 to 4 players. And so one of the nice things about this game is it wasn't like your typical Civ Empire where you just can turtle and then build over time, and they could take, 4, 5, 6, 8 hours all day. The fact that you had to get these objectives kind of forced you to the fight. You were kind of hurrying up and to try to get to the objectives before the other side got to their objectives. And so it really brought you had to bring the fight to the other side. It wasn't a matter of just building up. There was some build up because you had to conquer some planets to get some resources to build other units, but it wasn't this really long slog. So not only did it streamline some of the elements from StarCraft and some of the gameplay, but it also kind of made the gameplay a little bit more focused and how you got to based on the objectives. Now and you had some home worlds, like this was home world for the Eldar, because it's got its symbol there. And they can have a choice of which one you want to start off with as a home world. Then you got the home world for the orcs there, or that's the chaos, but no, that's the orcs, I think. So and then you had, as I said, you had several tiles. Here's the Ultramarine home worlds, or sector, as it might be. So there's a lot of different tiles. And the way the gameplay worked is you had these order tiles, which is kind of reminiscent if any of you played Game of Thrones, the board game. You had like these order tiles that you're going to put down, and someone else can put down an order tile, and then they're resolved I believe, if I'm correct, they resolve top to bottom. And so there's kind of a timing mechanism of how you put the orders and where you put the orders at. And these orders are going to determine what happens. They're like specific orders for your faction that that you get to determine, you know, what goes on, like whether you can move into the sector, whether you can attack in a sector, whether you can deploy, or the like. Here's like a reference card. Everybody gets one of these reference cards here, and you can have, whoa, it's all out of my hand here. You can deploy, strategize, dominate, and advance. So you have some different actions, and each faction can. This is the Orc faction here, I believe. You can enhance your orders. You know, there's a way to enhance your orders to get like different orders or better orders over time that do kind of different things. And there's also, in this game, also had like event cards and combat cards that you use for combat, and with events that kind of change things up. And these were unique to the faction. So each of the 4 factions had their own deck of unique cards for like combat and events and the like, that they could do something a little bit different. So there was a little bit of asymmetric player abilities in here. You had different objectives that you were going through that were on the board in different locations. You can build your units at different, you know, times, or different types of units that had different abilities. So a lot of asymmetrical empire building type elements, but kind of focused into this, you know, seeking out objectives, that was really kind of streamlined the whole thing. So I liked it. I was kind of sad that they didn't come out with, you know, they had this big box and they didn't come out with more stuff. But you had 4 factions in here. Here's the Eldar. You know, each of them had their own unique minis. Here's the Orcs. And again, each of them had, and there's a lot of, you know, they had the unique orders and their own dial for builds, and a lot of different counters. And it's all, you know, Fantasy Flight, very good, thick counters, you know, punch outs, that good quality there. And everybody had their own decks. And here's the Chaos and the rest of the Ultramarines. So as I said, there was a lot of goodness in this box, and a lot of gameplay with the 4 factions, and I liked it. As I said, I was a little disappointed that they didn't come out with more, because they could have come out with either more factions, because this is a pretty rich universe of stuff they could have done, or they could have augmented some of the factions that even came in here, some of the standard factions that they had. So anyway, when I got this, I'd never played StarCraft again. I really do need to get that out, and I might save that for another Sci-Fi Fantasy Saturday at some point. And maybe I'll compare the gameplay, but a lot of the gameplay in this was derived from StarCraft. But again, I think they did a better job of tightening it up and making it a little bit more streamlined, and being able to play it a little bit quicker. And plus, I think they fit it with the theme fine here as well. Anyway, so that's what I have for you today. I haven't done a lot of sci-fi lately, so had to get back to that. I'll save StarCraft for yet another day. Plus, I've got quite a bit of other sci-fi stuff that I can get to as well as fantasy. So that's the intent of my Sci-Fi Fantasy Saturday. So hope you found this interesting. Did any of you guys play this stuff? Do any of you play Warhammer 40K or Warhammer, the miniature side, or any of the other games that are in its genre? Of course, Games Workshop comes up with their own games, and with miniatures as well. Any of you guys play that, and I'd love to see your thoughts on that, or if you've played StarCraft and what you thought of that. Again, I haven't gotten that out in quite a bit of time, ever since this one came out. But I haven't got this one to the table recently as well. My son and I used to play this and enjoyed it. So anyway, that's what I have for you today. Leave your comments. Love to know what you're thinking about any of this stuff. And I hope you have a great rest of your Saturday. Whoa, come back here. Can't leave without talking about the dice. Yeah, nice little dice here. Kind of interesting. Custom dice that for combat, you know, different indicators on, defense or attack and morale and stuff like that. But kind of nice little dice. Anyway, now you can go. Thanks for watching.